Lesson 3 of Porphyry's Isagogy on difference. Key terms for this lesson: reviewing species, which is what Aristotle calls a definition or a statement of the essence of a subject. This is that which makes a subject what it is, or specific, so-called, from species. And this has to do with difference. There's such thing as a specific difference. That is the difference that makes something the species that it is. But difference itself is any instance of being unlike or distinct from something else, either in nature, form, or quality. So just because there are specific differences, that doesn't mean that all differences are specific. There's different types of differences. So for example, a man differs specifically, that is in his species, from an antelope because he has a rational nature while the antelope does not. But he may differ from another man by being a faster or slower runner than he. That's a difference in quality, not in specific nature. And in this lesson, we're talking about animals. And in that genus of animal is included God. And you might think, well, God is not an animal. But in this case, animal doesn't mean a fuzzy creature with a tail. It comes from the Latin word anima, which means soul, spirit, life, vital force, or breath. So an animal is any living thing possessed of the breath of life or sensitive soul. So in classical logic, animal would be a genus that is distinct from a plant, which is living, but it doesn't have that vital force or breath that things like mammals and humans and even God and spirits have. They have life, vital force. Even if it's not a literal breath, they have the breath of life. Difference may be predicated commonly, properly, and most properly. For one thing is said to differ from another in common, from its differing in some respect in diversity of nature, either from itself or from something else. For Socrates differs from Plato in diversity of nature, and himself from himself when a boy, and when become a man. Also when he does anything or ceases to do it, and it is always perceived in the different ways in which a thing is somehow effected. In other words, these common differences mean that something is different from another thing in respect to diversity of nature. In other words, there's more than one thing with that nature. So Socrates and Plato are different beings, but they're both human beings. They have the same nature, but there's diversity within that nature. There's different individuals within that nature. So that's a common difference. And another form of this is the common difference even with the same subject. So for example, Socrates was different when he was a boy than when he was a man. The same individual, the same nature, but different. And when a human does something and then stops doing it, it's perceived in the different ways in which the thing is somehow affected. So in other words, Socrates is different when he's running than he is when he's standing or when he's laying down. These are differences not of his nature, but of the thing he's doing. Again, one thing is said to differ properly from another when one differs from another by an inseparable accident. But an inseparable accident is such as blueness or crookedness, or a scar becomes serous from a wound. Moreover, one is most properly said to differ from another when it varies by specific difference, as man differs from horse by specific difference, or in other words, by the quality of rationality. If you remember a definition for accident, that's something which is not essential to that thing's nature, and there are separable accidents and inseparable accidents. So an inseparable accident is not essential to its nature, but it is still something that that subject possesses unchangeably to some extent. So, for example, a blue shirt. Blueness would be an inseparable accident of that shirt. That shirt doesn't have to be blue to still be a shirt, but in this case, that shirt is blue, and that's part of what identifies it as that particular shirt. That's an inseparable accident. A separable accident would be something like a person who is cold. Okay, that has nothing to do with his nature, and it's not even an accident that really has anything to do with that particular individual itself. That could change at any moment. He could be cold one moment and then put on a sweater, and now he's not cold anymore. So that's a separable accident. And then there's specific difference, and as we said, that is what distinguishes one species from another. So a man is specifically different from a horse because the man has the quality of rationality, whereas the horse does not. Universally, then, every difference acceding to a thing renders it different, but differences common and proper render it different in quality, and the most proper render it another thing. Hence, those which render it another thing are called specific, but those which make it different in quality are simply called differences, for the difference of rational being added to animal makes it another thing, and makes a species of animal. So in our discussion, when we're just using the word difference, we're talking about all those other types of differences that don't make it a different kind of thing. And when we're talking about the distinguishing characteristic of this species, we're going to call it a specific difference, as rational is a specific difference that distinguishes man from a horse or something like that. But difference of being moved makes it different in quality only from what is at rest, so that the one renders it another thing, but the other only of another quality. According, then, to the differences which produce another thing, do the divisions of genera into species arise, and the definitions arising from genus and such differences are assigned. On the other hand, as to those which only make a thing different in quality, diversities alone consist, and the changes of subsistence of a thing. Beginning then again from the first, we must say that of differences, some are separable, others inseparable. Thus to be moved and to be at rest, to be ill and to be well, and such as resemble these are separable, but to have a crooked or a flat nose, or to be rational or irrational, are inseparable differences. All right, so rehashing what we just said, some of those types of differences are inseparable accidents, and some are inseparable specific differences. So having a crooked nose, that's an inseparable accident. You can't really change that. That doesn't fluctuate by time. But being rational, that is an inseparable specific difference. Again, of the inseparable, some exist per se, others by accident. For rational, mortal, to be susceptible of science are inherent in man per se, but to have a crooked or flat nose accidentally, and not per se. So there again, that's why they're accidents. They're not inherent in man per se. They're not essential to his nature or universal. Wherefore, such as are present per se are assumed in the definition of substance, and effect a different thing. But what are accidental are neither taken in the definition of substance, nor render a thing another, but of another quality. Those two which are per se do not admit of the more and less, but the accidental, even if they be inseparable, admit of intention and remission. For neither is genus more and less predicated of that of which it is the genus, nor the differences of genus according to which it is divided. For these are such as complete the definition of each thing, but the essence of each is one and the same, and neither admits of intention nor remission. To have, however, a crooked or a flat nose, or to be in some way colored, admits both of intention and remission. So the whole point of all this that he's discussing is making very careful clarifications about the nature of things, and being able to identify which qualities make something specifically different from something else. What is it that is a universal, unchangeable quality essential to the nature of that thing, versus all the other types of differences which are either changeable or unchangeable, which are not an essential part of something. And those types of things admit of intention or remission, or in other words, they can be greater or lesser, more or less. You can have a somewhat crooked nose, you can have a super crooked nose, but the things which are inseparable and specific, like rationality and mortality, you can't be more or less mortal. You're just mortal. You can't be more or less rational. Now, you can have a greater faculty of rationality, you can be smarter, but you can't be like half rational or extra rational. You just are or you're not. Since then there are three species of difference considered, some indeed separable, but others inseparable, Again, of the inseparable, some are per se, but others accidental. Moreover, of differences per se, some are those according to which we divide genera into species, but others according to which the things divided become specific. Thus, of all such differences per se of animal as these, animated and sensitive, rational and irrational, mortal and immortal, the difference of animated and sensitive is constitutive of the essence of animal, for animal is an animated substance endued with sense. But the difference of mortal and immortal, and that of rational and irrational, are the divisive differences of animal, for through these we divide genera into species. So we're going to see this on the Porphyrian tree in a moment, and this is what I was talking about, those types of differences which distinguish different species and genera. So the specific difference, if you're taking something that is living, okay, you take the genera of living and you introduce the specific difference, animated and sensitive, then you have just specified the species of animal. An animal is something which is animated. Remember our definition of animal. We're not talking about creatures in the sense we think of animals. We're talking about something that has that sensitive soul versus something like a plant, okay, which is also alive, but it's not an animal. So within the genus of living things, we introduce that difference, sensitive soul, and we have just created a species, and that species is animal. And then within the species of animal, we have differences which create more species. So we have rational animals and irrational animals. You have mortal animals and immortal animals. Remember, under this logical definition, angels or God, things like that, those would be immortal animals. They do have a spirit, they have the breath of life, but they're not mortal. And so depending on what types of differences they are and where we introduce them into a structure of genus and species, those differences are the things which divide those different subsets. Yet these very differences which divide the genera are constitutive and completive of species. For animal is divided by the difference of rational and irrational, and again by the difference of mortal and immortal. But the differences of rational and mortal are constitutive of man, but those of rational and immortal of God, those again of mortal and irrational of irrational animals. Thus also, since the differences of animate and inanimate, sensitive and void of sense, divide the highest substance, animate and sensitive added to substance complete animal, but animate and deprived of sense form plant. So starting at the top of the Porphyrian tree over here, you can see you have substance at the top, and we divide that by the difference corporeal substance and incorporeal substance. Okay, that which has a body and that which does not have a body. And corporeal substance, that which has a body, we call this a new species of corpus or body. And that we further divide into animate and inanimate, or living and not living. And the animate becomes a new species. That's the living body. And we can divide that into sensitive and not sensitive, or in other words, having a sensitive soul and not having a sensitive soul. And that with the sensitive soul, we rename as the species animal. So that is a living body with a sensitive soul. And then animal is further divided into rational and irrational. And the rational animal is renamed as the species rational animal. And that's further divided into mortal and immortal. And the mortal rational animal is renamed as the species man. So that's how that Porphyrian tree works. And that's how you can distinguish all those different genera and species as you work your way down. Now, notice that we're only looking at the differences, the specific differences on one side. Now, you could do that with each of the other ones that are not further subdivided. So, for example, you could take irrational animals and you could subdivide that further into different types of species there. Or you could take immortal rational animals and you could subdivide that into different species. So we're only looking at the Porphyrian tree that leads from substance, the category, all the way down through the genera and species until you get to man at the bottom. Since then, the same differences taken in one way become constitutive, but in another divisive, they are called specific. These indeed are especially useful for divisions of genera, and for definitions, yet not with regard to those which are inseparable accidentally, nor still more with such as are separable. And indeed, defining these, they say that difference is that by which species exceeds genus, or in other words, man exceeds animal in being rational and mortal, for animal is neither any one of these, since whence would species have differences? Nor has it all the opposite differences, since otherwise the same thing would at the same time have opposites. But, as they allege, it contains all the differences which are under it in capacity, but not one of them in energy. So neither is anything produced from non-entities, nor will opposites at the same time subsist about the same thing. All he's saying here when he's talking about man exceeding animal, in other words, man is more specific than animal, and in that sense he exceeds animal, or that is he goes outside of that species in such a way that the species animal, the genus animal, is comprised by all those things which share a very basic commonality of being a animated body. So that includes pairs of opposites. That includes things which are rational animated bodies and irrational animated bodies. And so once you add that distinguishing difference, that exceeds the mere species of animal. Now that animal species becomes the genus, and the new species becomes rational animal. That becomes man. Again, they define it, meaning difference, also thus. Difference is that which is predicated of many things differing in species in answer to the question of what kind a thing is. For rational and mortal, being predicated of man, are spoken in reply to what kind of thing man is, and not as to the question, what is he? For when we are asked what is man, we properly answer an animal. But when men inquire what kind of animal, we say properly that he is rational and mortal. So the difference is what is predicated to the subject. That's what's added on to further distinguish. We can establish what something is, but whenever we establish a broad what, like a genus, we can usually get a more specific what kind of. So if we ask what a man is, the answer is animal. And we say, okay, what kind of man is he? That's when we get into these differences, these specific differences. For since things consist of matter and form, or have a constitution analogous to matter and form, as a statue is composed of brass, matter, but of figure, form, so also man, both common and specific, consists of matter analogous to genus, and of form analogous to difference. But the whole of this, animal, rational, mortal, is man, in the same manner as the statue there. So he's drawing a distinction here that when we're making these divisions, these don't divide the thing itself. These divide the ideas by which we think about the thing. We can identify a difference in, if we're thinking about a statue, we can identify a difference in the matter of the statue, which is brass, and the form, which is, say, a sculpture of a man. So a brass statue of a man. That brass statue is just that thing, but we can identify with ideas different elements of it, the matter and the form. And likewise with man or other types of things like that. So it's not like man is an amalgamation of all these different parts, animal and rational and mortal, that these are all little different things that all go together and form man out of a mixture, but rather they are all concepts that apply universally to what man is as he is in himself. They also describe it thus. Difference is what is naturally adapted to separate things which are under the same genus, as rational and irrational separate man and horse, which are under the same genus animal. Again, they give it in this way. Difference is that by which each singular thing differs. For man and horse do not differ as to genus, for both we and horses are animals, but the addition of rational separates us from them. Again, both we and the gods are rational, but the addition of mortal separates us from them. So as I said earlier, the whole purpose of this is to really be careful with our language and our thoughts when we're trying to clarify and classify and organize things. And this is going to be important with logic because so much of logic depends on the structure and form of what you're saying, what kinds of statements you're making about different categories of things or different types of things. So he's putting a great deal of emphasis on the nature of difference and how it functions in these various ways to underline these things in our mind. When we say that man and horse do not differ as to genus, okay, so when we're talking about things being different, we have to be specific about how they're different. If you are making an argument and part of your argument starts with something, well, man is different from a horse, okay, properly speaking, somebody who's arguing against you could say, no, he's not. They are the same genus. They're both animals. So you would have to be more specific. You would have to restate your argument about what it is you're saying exactly. No, man is different from a horse because he has rationality. And therefore, the difference you're talking about that makes your argument work or not is actually the rationality. That's a specific difference. That's the difference in species. And in the form and the structure of logical arguments, that is very fundamental. Being able to make those careful distinctions of difference and understand what is the actual difference that I'm talking about and how it relates to my argument. They, however, who more nicely discuss what pertains to difference, say that it is not any casual thing dividing those under the same genus, but such as contributes to the essence, and to the definition of the essence of a thing, and which is part of the thing. For to be naturally adapted to sail is not the difference, though it is the property of man, since we may say that of animals. Some are naturally adapted to sail, but others not, separating man from other animals. Yet a natural ability to sail does not complete the essence, neither is a part of it, but only an aptitude of it, because it is not such a difference as those which are called specific differences. Wherefore specific differences will be such as produce another species, and which are assumed in explaining the very nature of a thing. And concerning difference, this is sufficient. All right, so he's pretty much beaten difference to death here, gone over it in great detail, especially as it pertains to specific difference. And he's here introducing the idea of a property. Okay, the type of difference or thing that something has, which might be different from something else, but that is an aptitude of that thing. It's not a quality that is essential to it. It's not something that completes its essence. We'll be talking about that more in the next lesson. And once again, your key terms for this lesson: species, difference, and animal.